Hello and good evening. Welcome to SKTV and you're watching the Manipur Files. I'm your host, UTPALA LONGJAM. Thank you all for joining on this crucial debate on spillover risks of Manipur conflict. This topic is of great significance not only to Manipur but to the rest of the northeastern region of India. And we are honored to have a distinguished panel of experts to discuss this. Today's debate aims to explore the spillover risks of the Manipur conflict on the neighboring states and to discuss potential solutions for ensuring peace and stability in the region. We will examine the security, humanitarian, economic, communal, and political aspects of the issue and consider immediate as well as long-term strategies for addressing it. Before we begin, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to our panelists who will be sharing their insights and perspectives. On my left, we have Dr. ARAMBAM NONI, Associate Professor, Political Science, DMU. Welcome to the Manipur Files. Next, we have Mr. IBUNGOCHOUBI, Executive Editor, Manipur Mail. Welcome to Manipur Files. And lastly, joining us, we have Mr. DHIREN SADOKPAM, Editor-in-Chief, The Frontier Mail. Frontier Manipur, welcome to the Manipur Files.
Thank you.
Now, without much delay, let's begin with the debate of today. My first question would be for Dr. ARAMBAM NONI. Dr. ARAMBAM NONI, can you tell us what are the primary risks involved with the spillover of Manipur's conflict into the neighboring regions?
I think the spillover has already occurred, I think. If you look at the newspaper reports, if you look at the incidents that actually has happened in the couple of days before, we have seen, particularly in Kachar district of Assam, encounter between the police and suspected Mao militants, which has also resulted in the killing of three Mar militant, allegedly and reportedly, as expressed in the newspapers. We have also seen a lot of problems in DHIREN particularly, and DHIREN is very important in terms of its geographic intercourse with different other states, particularly Assam, Mizoram, and Manipur. So if you look at the spillover possibility, we cannot deny the already affected relationship between ethnic groups in Assam, particularly in Kachar districts.
Right.
And we have also seen for about 15 years, from 2001 to 2015, Assam Kachar district has seen a lot of violence between the Dimashas and Mars, in which roughly 1,000 people have been already killed. If you talk about the spillover problem, I think it is not only the Manipur conflict that has affected their relationship, the anxiety, the insecurity as felt by people in Dolai constituency of Kachar district particularly. I think this has to be seen in relation to the previous experience of ethnic conflict between Dimasas and the Mars. And it is reported that in the Dolai constituency itself, which is just adjacent to DHIREN, which is about 7 kilometers from DHIREN town, they had already experienced 29 persons being killed in those days. 2003, around 2003, 15 people lost their lives and many people are displaced. Around 90 houses were burned. The problem that we see, the insecurity, the anxiety that we see in this particular constituency of Assam in Kachar district is not only because of the Manipur violence, I think, but because of the already entrenched, existing, deepened ethnic distrust. And more importantly, the anxiety, the apprehension, particularly for the Dimasas, I think, has increased because of the recent increase in the movement of Mar militants. As if you look at the newspaper reports, it is being informed, it is being said that a lot of militant groups, quote unquote tribal militant groups, are moving in groups in these areas, which has actually caused a lot of insecurity to the people in that particular constituency of Kachar district. So therefore, I think one has to look at the already existing tension between the two communities, which only perhaps ended in around 2015. But I think the remnants of the hatred, the remnants of the distrust is still prevalent in the particular district and in Assam as well. So if you look at the strategic location of Jiribam as a place, as a district, and I think this district is very important for many tribal militant groups, but because they seem to have been operating in this area for quite some time. If you look at the dense forests, if you look at the tri-junction between of 3 states, particularly Mizoram, Manipur and Assam. So you can see the militants possibly moving here and there, and they can hit and move back into the jungle. So these kind of possibility has actually caused a lot of alarm to the people who are civilians, in fact, without arms. So the people from Dolai constituency in Cachar district, particularly Dimasas, I guess, they have been demanding enforcement of stricter border surveillance, and also even to keep a very specialized border post, police force to actually contain this possibility of violence. So on the whole, I think the spillover possibility of Manipur conflict is very high. We have not only seen the spillover effects in Jiribam or in the adjacent areas of Jiribam or Assam border areas, but we have seen these kind of problems in Kamjong, and where you have borderlands with Myanmar state. So you can see people moving here and there, and militants also reportedly moving and having a lot of free access to the border areas of Manipur.
Right.
And if you have seen the violence that is increasing in Myanmar state, so the spillover effects have been seen all around the state and in the neighboring areas, particularly on Assam side, and also on the Myanmar side, where Kamjong district is located. When we talk about spillover risk, I think we also have to talk about the narrative level spillover problems, where disinformation campaigns have run very high, and even at the international forums, we have seen people, the diaspora members, speaking the language of only one community, and people. When you talked about the humanitarian issues, I think when we are seeing our problem being discussed at the global scale, we have a feeling that that people have really been misled also by a lot of vested interest groups who are trying to malign the image of the Manipur state, and also kind of say cause ethnic distrust by using different sources of their diplomacy. So that is really hampering our state as well. So on the whole, what I would like to argue is that the spillover risk is very high, and in order to resolve these kind of spillover problems, I think as far as Manipur and Assam is concerned, the two governments, the two states will have to come together, and I expect the church leaders, I expect the civil society leaders be involved, and we need a very good understanding between the states, particularly Assam and Manipur in this case. So Jiribam, which is a very multi-ethnic in character, where you have the Bengali Muslims, the Meitei Pangals, the Meiteis, and Mars, and many other communities. Similarly, on the other side of the border, which is about 7 kilometers from Jiribam, in Dolai constituency, you have the Riangs, the Jeme, the Mars, the Dimasas. So these has made these locations very interestingly multicultural. But if you see the kind of conflicts that has erupted in the last couple of decades, this multicultural identity of these locations and spaces have been actually rather affected. So one must hold on to this idea that there are multicultural spaces, multicultural areas where people do exist together, and any community or any group or any force that is trying to disturb this tranquility must be held accountable, and they must be punished under the provisions established under law. So I think we have to ensure that the law enforcing agencies actually rely on just and appropriate intervention, and then only I think these groups who are trying to take advantage of this situation, particularly the instability that is coming up in Manipur. There is no doubt that there are groups who are trying to actually benefit out of this, and it seems like that the conflict that we saw in Assam in 2001 and between 2001 and 2015 is almost almost on the brink of coming back. If you don't stop this, and if you don't stop this at this time, I think there is a risk of the spillover effect on these areas and becoming very, very severe. The governments must act. The civil societies must be now proactively involved. I would like to say this.
Thank you for your thoughts, Doctor. I'll come to Mr. N. Ibungochoubi. Well, Mr. N. Ibungochoubi, how has the security situation been impacted in neighboring states, as Dr. ARAMBAM NONI just mentioned about Assam, the security being beefed up over there in spite of that? And another relating to that, it's basically I think the Bhuban Pahar, which is supposed to be a sacred peak, that has been basically been occupied by allegedly by militants. So what could be their strategy? What could be in their mind that they are occupying that place? Because it all started in Manipur, and it was supposed to be a conflict between two communities of Manipur, mainly the Kukis and the Meiteis. But how is it that now it's spilled over to Assam, and what are the implications that this can actually bring?
If we have to look at the genesis of all the armed groups in the entire northeastern region, it has its own story. It has its own serious implications, both at the so-called grassroots level of all the political establishments in our region. Even if we talk of the spillover in the neighboring states, the only tragedy is that we are also neighboring with foreign countries. When you have a country like Myanmar, which I believe they have over 27 to 30 ethnic groups, and every single ethnic group in Myanmar itself, they have their own political ambitions and aspirations of an identity, which has its own domino effect in our own neighboring states, say right from Arunachal Pradesh to Assam to Manipur to Tripura to Nagaland. And when we talk of neighborhood, or when we talk of spillover risk of Manipur conflict in the neighboring areas, we cannot leave behind our own foreign countries, including Bangladesh. When you have a conflict in Bangladesh, the neighboring states, including Manipur, Assam, Meghalaya, will have its own domino effect because of the spillover or the influx of people who are either at the danger point or who are at the risk of being there. The return of so many students from Bangladesh, over 500 students, they were flown, and including students from Bhutan and other countries, they first had to come to India. So when we talk of the conflict, which of course you can say that from the very last year of May, there has been a very serious conflict between two communities. It also affects small communities. When we recall the very foundation of the Ma People's Convention, which also became a political party. Earlier, as we know, that every single ethnic community, they had their own political ambition, they had their own aspiration to be an independent entity, not even though it may not be a state, however being recognized, however small the community could be. Even Mar also being one of those communities. I think it was 1985-86 when they became a political party. Otherwise, before that, they were also an armed group of the Ma People's Convention. Now, so-called later, it became the Ma People's Convention Democratic. We have to understand that every single community, whether it is Assam or Arunachal Pradesh, or even Manipur, or to some extent Tripura. The ethnic groups has its own way of expressing its own aspirations, whether it is in the form of an armed group or whether it is in the form of a political movement. So Mar People's Convention earlier also had its own political ambition of being recognized as a political entity in terms of an identity. Now, whether this particular movement or the recent incident in Assam has to be linked with or has to be related with what is happening in Manipur is a different political dimension. Security and now armed conflict or the politicians. There is a belief that whether it is Manipur or whatever, some of the small states that is in our own neighborhood, to be a political party, to become a political leader, you should have the support of those who were once in the armed conflict, whether they are in the government as understood to be a relationship with the government, which you now call SU, suspension of operation, or a dialogue between these groups. Our only worry is when political aspirations are expressed through the barrel of the gun. So that brings human tragedy and more conflict. It was expected that it is bound to happen, because Manipur became a safe haven for almost many armed groups because of the natural terrain, of the so-called the big forest or the available natural supportive way where the armed militants or the insurgents could maintain as one of their hideouts or training centers. It was not disturbed for a long time. When the conflict happens in Manipur, somebody will have to go away from this very place to find another safe haven if they are trying to express their political aspirations in the way of an armed conflict. So how Assam is going to deal with the spillover or the domino effect from Manipur is something that we have to very closely watch.
Is there a possibility that this could become even more bigger than it already is?
I think the statement which I read from the Chief Minister of Assam, Himanta Biswa Sharma, he was very clear in his own philosophy of how the state has in fact suffered during the tough times of Ulfa. And a group of Ulfa now has gone into a peace dialogue, and they have already met a very major achievement through dialogue. So I think one group is still there, but a major group which was once, led by the General Secretary, Anup Chetia, and among other things. Now they have gone into a very serious dialogue with the government of India, and now Assam is by large a very big state and a very resourceful state, and I would not, or we would not expect Assam to tolerate any kind of armed rebel, as is if we have to understand by what Himanta Biswa says. I think that must be heard with caution. Of course, we are also watching, and then following up the incidents that happened very recently, where 3 so-called armed had become victim of the conflict that is between the state and the armed conflict. Now, in my opinion, whatsoever happens in Manipur, it will definitely have its own impact, not only in the neighboring states of India, but also in the neighboring countries. Say, including, we should never forget Nepal also. We should never forget Myanmar and Bangladesh, because many of the groups or many of the so-called communities, they have a common place to stay, and Myanmar is one, Bangladesh is one. Of course, Bhutan is free from that so-called political movement, and government of India, even the Bhutan, they have a very good relationship, and the kind of a conflict, whether it is so-called geopolitics of Pakistan or China, I think Nepal, Myanmar and Bangladesh, these are 3 neighboring countries which will seriously be having some kind of an influence in our own political channels of the thought process of any armed conflict or law and order. I think this is what we have to say.
Okay, thank you so much for your views, Mr. IBUNGOCHOUBI. I'll come to Mr. DHIREN SADOKPAM. Well, we just spoke about how the armed groups are trying to get their, as I mentioned, the MAR groups trying some sort of a strategy to take over some places, that location in Assam. And we've also seen that the Chief Minister of Assam has spoken about it. So do you think the government, now I'll come to the government of India, do you think the government of India would follow a similar strategy or similar step in the way they've dealt with the conflict in Manipur, where Assam is concerned?
Utpala, I think Noni has already mentioned about the kind of what is actually happening, what is brewing in the region, and I think IBUNGOCHOUBI has already explained in detail about why it has become kind of a natural flow, like a natural flow, kind of a wave. If some conflict happens at a place called Manipur, we also have international borders, and
right.
It crosses over either across the international borders or within the border and the neighborhood. But having said this, I would want to take this debate slightly in a different context. There's an Indonesian strategic thinker called Sukuma. Okay, he had once mentioned in one of his writings that we should understand conflict in terms of horizontal conflict and vertical conflict. Okay. So, what does he mean by the vertical conflict? Vertical conflict is, for instance, the armed groups, armed opposition groups, as we understand in Manipur, like UNLF or what you call the PLA or RPF. They had been fighting New Delhi straight on, either demanding independence or either restoration of the sovereignty and all that kind of thing. So their what you call movement is directed to New Delhi. Okay. So it's not kind of a ethnic based kind of thing, but purely based on a vertical conflict. So he calls those kind of a typology as the vertical conflict. And horizontal conflict is something that happens when you weaponized, ethnic aspirations, which is very distinct from the idea of the vertical conflict, the horizontal conflict. So, like Meitei Kuki would be horizontal conflict, Naga Kuki would be horizontal conflict, and also Noni as well as Tamu had already mentioned about in the various dynamics of horizontal conflict. Like for instance, the Mar versus the Assamese, or in my for me, I think one good example. I think the two of our experts have have not mentioned is also the Karbi experience. Noni had mentioned about Dimasa, then Tamu had mentioned about what happens there in the thing. But Karbi in 2003 and 2004, if you remember, so there, what happened? It was a kind of a conflict that was generated, I think, because of the horizontal, because of weaponization of what I call the ethnic aspirations. So once you weaponize and what you call ethnic aspirations, this is bound to happen. So at a place like Karbi Anglong, and also in one particular area called Singason Hills, I think Tamu would know. So for instance, for me, I have worked in that area as well as Nagaland. So Singason Hill areas and all, Karbi and Karbi group, particularly KRA, Kuki Revolutionary Army, and UPDSC, United People's Democratic Solidarity of Karbi Anglong. They had a spat, armed confrontation, and about 100 people died, perhaps 40 decide, 50 decide, and I think the figure keeps on changing, kind of thing from time to time. There's no exact figure available, but officially they have given some figure, like I think it was down to Karbis, where I think some 50, Karbis suffered more casualties than the Kukis and all. So this kind of conflict goes on, but see, forget the figures of how many people actually died and all, but see, this is actually what happens when you start weaponizing ethnic aspirations, because one kind of I think one move that the government of India, New Delhi, is pushing forward is trying to convert all the vertical conflicts into a horizontal conflict. That way they think, I suppose New Delhi thinks that's the easiest way of bringing a
But
solution.
don't you think that it could get out of hand and there might come a point
No,
when they may not...
that's the fallout.
Exactly.
So when you weaponize ethnic aspirations,
Right.
foregoing certain kind of a tradition, like when I call traditional form of insurgency, like the Naga insurgency, which began way back even before the before the Indian independence. I mean, if you see, Naga movement began way back in the 1920s, where they submitted what you call memorandum to the Simon Commission.
Okay.
In fact, the consolidation of Naga nationalism, as that happened in Nagaland, has been much more ahead of the Indian nationalism that we were trying to build up.
Okay.
Okay, so as far back as 1920s, they had already submitted memorandum to the Simon Commission saying that Nagas had been different. In fact,
Okay.
I call that primordial definition of nationalism at that point of time, which has become quite fashionable nowadays, because if you resort to the postmodern notion of what nationalism is, there is a tendency to identify nationalism from the primordial feelings and instincts. So in the memorandum to the Simon Commission by Nagas then, they had already mentioned that we the Hindus don't like us because we take beef, and the Muslims don't like us because we take pork.
Right.
So I call them, that is the definition of nationalism at the primordial, very basic definition of kind of thing. But
Right.
yet it was not a kind of a horizontal kind of movement.
Right.
First they were seeking permission to the British Crown, submitting memorandum to the Simon Commission, and later on they fought the Indian Union because straight on. So it was kind of a vertical conflict.
It remained
But
vertical.
eventually all these vertical conflicts, for instance Manipur,
Right.
from the 60s, Manipur, for instance, though leadership and guardianship must have been taken, or leadership must have been led by the Meiteis, okay, but it was not based on weaponizing ethnic aspirations. It was based much more on the consciousness of the being of that reality called Manipur or Manipuri nationhood, which is very distinctly different from what I call ethnic assertions.
Okay.
So when you try to convert all forms of vertical conflict into horizontal conflict, because of various factors, causes might be even, when you try to do certain kind of try to bring solutions, solutions might not be the solution. It could be beginning of
Another
more problem,
bigger problem.
So I think this will be kind of a replicating. I think in the coming a decade or so, I think this will go on for a while. I think because people have gone out of their way to define ethnic, as I said, a weaponization of ethnic assertions in terms of what that my seeking autonomy only from the perspective of ethnic or ethnic sub-nationalism, which is very different from what normally in political theory we understand as what you call the civic nationalism. Civic nationalism is not based on that I'm Kuki or I'm Meitei or I'm Karbi or I'm Dimasa and all. No, it has to do with the idea of nationhood built on certain theory of emancipation, okay, which is distinctly different. So I think we should not encourage, or help what you call. I mean, in some sense, we should not put fuel to the fire, okay? Because the moment this horizontal conflict goes beyond control,
Exactly.
as Tamo Imphal has already said, we also have long international borders. So it might, any which way it might go.
It's already visible in Assam, and it was visible in Mizoram. Do you think this could spill over to Nagaland? What are the chances of it?
See, this is what I meant. As far as last year, June, I think I remember. I think it was June somewhere, Meghalaya, So when these people, I mean, from some, what do you call, after the conflict happened here in Imphal as well as in Churchandpur elsewhere, I think some Kuki were hunting for their what do you call rent in Shillong,
Okay.
The Rangbashnongs, they call it Rangbashnongs, are the local council.
Okay.
They put up a notice not to entertain them.
Okay.
Okay. So as far back as already, I mean, I'm not talking of the open confrontation, like head-on kind of a confrontation, but there was already, I think in Meghalaya is one, I think immediate. There was last year June, okay?
Okay.
The Rangbashnongs of the local councils,
Okay.
they did not, I mean, it's not official or totally public, but in a hush-hush manner, and in some localities, of course, they had taken an official stand that they should not allow cookies, or I think in some areas even Meiteis, to get house rents in Shillong and all, no?
Okay.
And also in recent times, I don't know if you are aware, I think Tamo must be aware, the Meghalaya also there is a movement to start what you call deleting cookies from, not only cookies, Naga tribes and Kuki tribes from the list of ST, okay, ST list from the
of the state.
Okay.
Okay.
So in Assam also has that and when you say Kuki group means, I think in Assam even Ranghols are included as part of the Kuki. Ranghols are the Tripuri kind of thing who are I think in Tripura, they are one of the indigenous groups in Tripura, but they have been clubbed within the Kuki conglomeration even in Assam. So if you see, there is a unending kind of a configurations.
Absolutely.
So that's why I'm saying, that's why I come back to kind of the idea of horizontal and the vertical conflict,
Right.
So if people think that, the horizontal, the vertical conflict, that is groups in Northeast like the Alpha or, bigger groups like UNLF or maybe other people, they might be at various stages of talk or non-talk factions and all that kind of thing. Naga peace talk had been going on for almost more than 25 years, almost 30 years now. Nothing definite has come. So I think New Delhi has a new thinking. I presume, okay? I'm not very sure what the Delhi Mandarins think about, but I presume that they want to convert this into a different form of conflict, whereby they think that will be much more easier to solve, okay? And that kind of a conflict is much more dangerous if you see into it.
Right.
Because converting vertical conflict into horizontal conflict would be disastrous, I'm telling you.
It is already showing.
It's already showing.
Right.
So be it in Singashon Hills or the area which you have mentioned in the Kachar area, what was it? You mentioned
Bhuban.
Bhuban. So these are only, if you check from the kind of a historical as well as kind of a spatial, we understand things in terms of spatial and temporal factor, okay?
Right.
So spatial means these are the spaces.
Right.
Okay, of course occupied by some people, and people think, they claim over that kind of a land, like we do, okay? But these are based on what I call that, the churnings of ethnic assertions, not only the churnings, but also the weaponization of the assertions.
Okay, but what I don't understand is, it started with Manipur, and now they are taking over the hill, which is not even a part of Manipur.
UTPALA, see, I choose to be different from your kind of a thing, okay? So I think, see, if you Nagas and Kukis fought for so long, no?
Yes.
In the mid 1990s, okay?
Right.
We were in Delhi. You were also in Delhi, I think, that time when we were. Oh, you were in Bombay. You were in Bombay at Times of India. We were in Delhi, okay? So I think mid 90s they had already had spat of long run kind of a conflict between the Nagas and the Kukis. When you say specifically Nagas, means the Tangkuls, the Rongmais, and the all the what you call Naga tribes in Manipur, particularly, and with the Kuki conglomeration, So I think this kind of thing it's not. I know it's not new. Let's not say that it's happening only just because of the recent. I mean, which some event that started on the 3rd of May last year, okay? I think it's got a long history. And if you note, okay, one thing that I have observed over a period of time, okay, my observation in the last 1 decade or almost 2 decades, because my professional experience is over 25 years now. So in the last 20 years is that horizontal and vertical is one thing. But another thing that I have experienced is when government is pushing for some kind of a solution, okay, there will be always this kind of a conflict. I mean, if you check the patterns.
Okay.
So, for instance, just before, I think Karbi Anglong, they have got Autonomous Council, and Dimasa Autonomous Council, they have got huge package from the government of India, and now they are almost financially independent.
Okay.
And the Karbi Kuki thing happened just before government in India pushed for the solution, okay?
Okay.
So likewise, even Dimasa, maybe some areas, you are getting the point.
Right.
So little solutions with little kind of a perspective, So I think that kind of answer. So even Naga talks also, when Naga and Kuki started fighting, then by 97, Nagas were already in the negotiating table.
Okay.
You see, even here also, I think it's happening in. No, I'm not trying to connect them, directly, but there's some kind of a pattern, into this kind of thing. When this kind of a conflict happens, so we also like our one group already is in peace talk with the government of India. So it can be for good and bad. That depends on how
Let's hope it turns out to be for the good, because
but,
I think.
But what I'm trying to tell you is, it's very dangerous, and at the same time it can be disastrous if we are thinking of settling the horizontal conflict by, pushing for the, or by supporting this, what do you call, in order to save the, in order to solve the vertical conflict, by increasing or pushing for the horizontal conflict, that's going to be very dangerous.
Makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much for your views. I'll come back to Dr. ARAMBAM Noni. Well, we spoke about DHIREN, the conflict in DHIREN, which was quite peaceful till now. Now it's almost 2 months since the conflict actually started over there, and DHIREN being, you can call it a lifeline for the valley area, for the rest of Manipur, since it's the bordering town to Assam. That has led to inflation-driven food security, food supply chain in Imphal. It's very visible, and the food chain has been, the supply chain has been affected in a very bad way, with inflation skyrocketing. I mean, it's gone up, it's gone beyond what the common people can actually afford now. And also we are seeing a lot of fragmentation, social fragmentation from this prolonged conflict. So what do you think that, how do you think we can control this? Because DHIREN, it seems, being a small place, it could have been controlled very easily, but apparently it wasn't. So how else can this food supply chain be solved? And also the social fragmentation that is taking place, it's very visible in the society now, with people turning against each other.
Of course, I think the previous speaker has rightly mentioned about the increase in the vertical, the horizontal spread of the conflict, which is very, very, serious matter. Given that situation, we have also seen the highways being blocked for months, and it's almost for a little more than a year that our highways have not been accessible to a particular community.
Exactly.
Not only the civilians can't move, but also the public goods, the consumer goods actually have not been able to freely move around. And DHIREN normally takes about some 10 hours journey, but these days it's taking around 4 days, if you have heard from the reports. So I think there is a very huge impunity exercised by the militant groups who are operating on these highways. So as ethnic groups, ethnic identities have been weaponized, we have also seen these highways being weaponized by certain groups. But it is against the given legal systems in the country and also the humanitarian protocols of the world. As you rightly talked about, the need for humanitarian value in a situation of conflict. And it is very unfortunate that the armed groups, who are more or less having a lot of influence over these areas, are actually acting in a very clandestine manner to actually disturb the movement of essential commodities. And you have seen the cooking gas is not available almost in the state of Manipur. It is not only one community that is affected, the entire state is affected, and the biggest impact is on economy. And poor people who are having less income, or even people who are with a reasonable income, they are also having problem because of the growing inflation. So I think what we need to ask is, why this impunity, and who and what factor has led to these kind of a culture of impunity exercised by these groups? Why the law enforcing agencies have not been able to act? Why they have not been able to be punished? These are questions lingering for so many years. If we talk about the economic and the livelihood problems, I think the state has actually really suffered
a lot.
And I think if you have seen the conflict that has occurred in Assam or in Manipur in the 90s, normally ethnic conflicts linger for quite some time.
And
so
to this extent.
so it's not a good sign for us. So the governments will have to really be sincere and honest in actually containing these violence. If you talk about how these groups are actually trying to weaponize these territories, is also because of the lingering peace processes.
Okay.
If you talk about the NSC and IM, the peace process has gone for more than 27 years.
Okay.
If you talk about the MAR, HP, CD, they have been in peace process with Mizoram government, demanding for an autonomous district council for MARs in Mizoram and Manipur, and even some portion of Assam. So there are overlapping, claims of identity politics.
Okay.
And as far as I'm concerned, I've been arguing and writing in my works that these overlapping territorial claims of ethnic groups have actually run against the normal practices of state system in the country. Not only within the country called India, but also if you look at a trans-border character of the ethnic mobilizations. So the problem that we face in Manipur today is also a reflection of various kinds of these trans-territorial mobilizations. For instance, HPCD, which is operating in Mizoram, would claim certain territory, portion of the state of Manipur, and also Assam. Similarly, the ethnic groups in Chin state having affinities with the ethnic communities in Manipur or in Assam or in Mizoram or in Nagaland or Arunachal, they will also begin to claim ethnic territories themselves. This has actually become a big challenge for the so-called post-colonial modern state, because to me it seems like these post-modern states have no clue to actually resolve these trans-territorial claims of identities. On the whole, what I see is that these trans-territorial claims of ethnic groups has actually created a lot of problems which are more or less unresolvable as far as we have experienced so far. So therefore, the present situation in Manipur, which has actually brought the two communities against one another, it seems like that ethnic communities who are in the quest for their political concessions are actually reviving, and they are reorganizing themselves to actually enhance their trans-territorial claims and trans-territorial ethnic identity movements. Therefore, the governments, when I say governments, I mean the state government and the central government. The lingering peace processes, even if you talk about the NSC and IM, or even with the Kuki groups, which started in 2005 and it is still going on, and there are a lot of claims and counterclaims on the sincerity and the transparency of these peace processes by different people. This has actually also harmed the ethnic balance in the state of Manipur particularly, because the ongoing problem looks like is being weaponized by these groups to actually increase the volume of their political articulation. For instance, initially if you look at the debates on the peace processes, particularly with the Kuki groups, it was more about giving more power to ADC, it was giving more power to district councils, or giving employment to the youths, or development funds for the youths within the state of Manipur. Even if you look at the preamble of the peace process, suspension operation, the territorial integrity of Manipur be protected and respected. That kind of provision is there. But as time goes, and as the conflict increases between the communities and the state, you can see the groups involved in the peace process or SU, they're actually going beyond what was agreed in 2005 or 2008. So I think we are heading towards a very difficult time where the ethnic groups are trying to reorganize, and most importantly, these ethnic aspirations have become highly armed in terms of their movements. And often I feel that that there is something wrong in the entire ethnic assertion, because if you say that there is a clash between one community and the other in the state of Manipur since May 3rd last year, I fail to understand why the movements have these ethnic groups they are weaponizing, they're using so much of violence, so much of arms.
Right.
Probably because they are trying to gain ground on a larger extent of their ethnic aspiration, and this has actually hampered peace in the state of Manipur. It is not a mere conflict which is happening at the level of civilians. I think the armed groups are apparently quite involved in the entire ethnic tension. So finally, what I want to say is that Manipur state being a multi-ethnic state, we must be very careful, and there must be channels open for bringing these people together and to regain the lost trust, the lost trust deficit.
Okay, thank you so much for your valuable input. My question for Mr. N. IBUNGOCHOUBI. Well, Dr. Noni just said that some of these issues seem unresolvable, and also at the same time there should be some channels which are open. What would you like to add to that?
As we understand that the entire northeastern region during the formation or the so-called the Union of India, there were many challenges, many issues, because the entire union had to be formed comprising over 500 princely states.
Okay.
And as DHIREN was saying, that you already had the Naga movement much before the unification of the formation of the Union of India. Even if we look at the World War I, the very history of the representation of the foot soldiers and the labor corps from the entire Northeast was in some way or today is being analyzed as the foundation or the premise on which the aspirations began. The very fact that a lot of people were recruited from this very region to be a part of the labor corps, not as a regular army. Say, for example, people from Manipur, from different areas, and people from Nagaland, when they were taken to Europe in the early part of the century. Now, the entire civilization that they saw in the European countries, and when they came back, it had given some kind of a philosophy, some kind of a thought of a new movement. The challenges before the Union Government of India today, as I had already reflected on my editorial, is if one has to examine a body, there has to be a proper pathological test. The Government of India has to look at Naga movement as an independent unit. They have to argue, they have to discuss, and they have to bring them on the table for a dialogue. So, for example, even if you look at Manipur, even if you look at the insurgency movement in Manipur, the apprehension, the fear today is the Government of India using a particular community to counter for a check and balance of another group. I think that is a fear, that is an apprehension that people are speaking out openly today. It would be a major disaster. It would be a political disaster. It would be a beginning of a disaster if at all the Indian bureaucracy or the polity, the Indian polity assumes that a particular community can be used as an ethnic group to check another group. I think this is one particular fear that is getting into the nerves of the people at the national level today. I was a part of a discussion, I was part of a video conference last week. A very senior official from the Government of India, who is now retired, now he says, or rather his comment was, when a patient has a chronic disease of the heart, it might have its all collateral damages in other basic organs of the body. If there is a problem in the kidney, you would treat the kidney. If you have a problem in the lung, you treat the lung. Say, for example, if you are going to deal with the insurgency movement of the Nagas, I think the straightforward approach should be to have a dialogue and to resolve the crisis by discussing with the Nagas. And now, the very fear or the apprehension because of the last incidents that we are seeing in Manipur, is not only the conflict that is happening within the country. The government of India having to play a role its own neighboring countries that people are not aware of, even we are not aware of. Only those people who are dealing with that particular crisis of what is happening in Myanmar, so-called the political development in Myanmar, and if at all, say for example, we all know what is Mukti Bahini. When the liberation of Bangladesh was done, the entire young people, they were in some way trained in many parts of India for the liberation of Bangladesh, which is Pakistan. Now, Indian government having to play a role in its own so-called geopolitics with the neighboring countries. Our state, our people should not be a part of that particular conflict. This is our editorial comment. And if the government of India, for example, if they have to take care of or they want to have a dialogue with the insurgents, so-called people from the Manipur or Nagaland, I think they should be focused rather than trying to use a particular community either in defending or attacking or in some way trying to destabilize the organizational structure of a particular community. I think, as I had already made my editorial comment, that it would be a major political disaster. And that is the first wrong premise of the Indian polity. If they think that a particular community can be used to counter another community, I think that is the domino effect that we are seeing in neighboring states. Now, for example, you will have its own impact in Mizoram, you will have its own impact in Arunachal Pradesh. Of course, Arunachal Pradesh is a very, very peaceful state. You will have a big impact even in Assam today. And now the Assam government having to respond to this so-called the skirmishes or whatever is the so-called the spillover of the problem that is happening in Manipur. Our editorial comment, so far as our editorial comment or my perspective is the government of India, they are the part of the crisis today. They are the part of the crisis today, and they are into deep crisis because they are a part of the crisis. As you know, we all recall that a very senior IPS officer has said that in our own country, I keep repeating this so that they will also hear. If there is a crisis, if there is a conflict in so-called India today, we are so strong, the government of India is so strong, the paramilitary forces and the defense is so strong that any communal conflict, any ethnic conflict can be contained, controlled within 24 hours. I think that is the strength of the country today. And the officer retired, he continues to say that if it continues more than 48 hours, the very government or the establishment is a part of that crisis. That is why we are beginning to ask whether is the government of India, is the government of Manipur, are they aware very consciously they are a part of the crisis. And we are talking of trust, simple people to people trust. We keep saying that people here in Manipur, you have to build that trust between the two communities. Now, you have a guardian as a government. The first priority, the duty of the government is to protect the life and property of every single citizen. Have they been able to perform their first constitutional duty to protect the life and property of the common people? I am talking of both the home ministers of the union and the state. Because the home minister, the home department is responsible, the state is responsible for maintaining law and order in this very state. So the union government is also the same political party. The state government, of course, is also from the same political party. Of course, now the central government is now a coalition government. However, they are so-called the leader in the house. Our take is, if the government has spelled out saying that there has to be a trust between the two communities. Now, will the people of this country forget about this state, trust the government? I think that is one primary issue that we have to address. When the government of India says that we will be handling this issue within 15 days. That was a statement of the Union Home Minister.
Right.
Now, I think he did not return to this very state till the last election.
Right.
So people say that, Mr. Ibungochoubi, you keep repeating this statement. We have to remind the government of India that the people of this country is looking at and observing at the statements of the Union Home Minister, of the Union Foreign Minister. They have not given a very clear statement as to how the government is making its own strategy, making its spelling out how they would be looking at this issue to bring about a result. The issue today is, will the people of Manipur trust the central government? Because the Union Home Minister, I think the very first month of May, he said he would be back after 15 days, and having to hear comments that the problem of Manipur is involvement of people from outside, the External Affairs Minister having to say that. Now, if such a thing happened in a place called Gujarat, if you look at if this thing had happened in so-called the diamond city of Surat or Baroda or Gandhinagar, how would have the government reacted, responded, trying to resolve?
Absolutely.
Which means the lack of seriousness and the political will and the love and affection of this very state by so-called the mainland political party. That is one big question mark that my friends from the other part of the country, they were discussing today and asking about Manipur. The stoic silence of the Prime Minister. Say, for example, now just let me take one more moment in saying this. All the political parties from Manipur, they are thinking that they would approach the central government today. Our editorial is very clear, my stand is very clear, that no political party from Manipur should go and approach Delhi today. It is very late. You might say that the time might happen, the wound is very deep. It is the duty of the central government and the political parties to come and visit and see what is exactly happening in Manipur for the last more than 1 year. That is the issue. And now people were demanding that the Prime Minister and the Home Minister and the Union Minister should come now today. Now the genuine feeling of the people is today, as we have heard in the open discussion in the social media, that even if they come, there is not going to be an impact on the mind, because they are not going to console, because that very word trust is missing today. I think that is the feeling that our mainland country or the so-called political party should know, that so-called the trust that they said that we have lost among ourselves is something not very true. But the very state, the people of this state and then the country, they have lost that trust in so-called the mainstream politics.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ibungochoubi. We would have really loved to continue, but because of time constraint, we'll have to cut short the debate. And in let's say about a minute, would you like to add anything to what Mr. Ibungochoubi just said?
UTPALA is okay. I think it's we don't have enough time to. And I think Ibungochoubi has put things into perspective, and I also contributed my part on the horizontal and the vertical thing. And I think Ibungochoubi has clearly also mentioned that, you know, it's no use actually feeding on one ethnic community or one community, you know, just to disentangle or to pull the rug, or maybe to destabilize, you know, to destabilize what you call the vertical conflict, which basically means, I mean, if you cannot handle kind of a group, an armed group, or 2, 3, 4 armed groups fighting New Delhi, but you cannot fit one community or other community to dismantle the edifice of so-called armed insurgency movement in not only in Manipur but in the rest of the country, which I think is very clear. But one thing I would want to add on to what Ibungochoubi has said is also what our current MP, you know, Bimal Akoizam had mentioned on the floor of the Parliament. I think I still recall, because it strikes. We had been also with Mr. Bimal, who is our honourable MP. We had been discussing all these kind of issues for a long time or so. He had clearly mentioned that, you know, there is a continuation of colonial mindset, you know, in the post-colonial period, which I think is a very strong kind of word. I think we should reflect on that. If the government of India or New Delhi had been silent for a year, I mean, obviously there will be trust deficit. And I wouldn't even call it trust deficit, as Ibungochoubi said, this is a total kind of thing, losing of faith, you know. We have completely lost faith, and people of Manipur are no fools that way. You know, if you literally look into it. So, and also I think as a one point to end this kind of a discussion is also there were many other people who thought at one point of time that Meiteis being, you know, some worshipper, I mean Hindus and all that kind of things. So people wanted to put Hindu and Muslim and all kinds of things.
Right.
So even the left of center, when I say left of center in the mainstream media or as well as in political parties, no, they used to think at one point of time all the Meiteis have supported BJP. But I think that thing also has been completely
to an end.
demolished, you know, by
Right.
very fact that we have chosen, both the Hills and the Valley have chosen
Right.
Congress, you know.
Right,
So it's not an electoral gambit, okay? So it's something else.
Right.
So I think that people needs to reflect on that, and I
Okay.
think we
So
need to, you know.
Thank you so much for your views. That brings us to the end of the this debate. It was a very informative as well as wonderful discussion or debate that we had with our wonderful panelists. I'd like to thank Dr. ARAMBAM NONI once again for being on the show. Mr. IBUNGOCHOUBI, thank you so much for being on the show. And Mr. DHIREN, SADOKPAM, it was a pleasure having you all on the show. Thank you to the three panelists and to our viewers. I'd like to, what we can take away from this debate is that we need to keep the channels open, and we do have tough times ahead, so we have to brace for that. And the government using a particular community is, as allegedly, is not going to resolve the issue. And of course, will the people of Manipur trust the central government? That's the question at the moment. So stay tuned, stay informed, and keep watching SKTV. Thank you for watching SKTV, the Manipur Files. I'm your host, UTPALA LONGJAM, signing off for tonight. Thank you and stay safe.